Okay. Let's do this. Is that on camera enough? Okay. Welcome to my studio, everyone. My name's Michael Markowski, and today we're going to look at your artwork. We're going to look at all the incredible artwork that you've been creating over the past couple of months. And so I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite aspects of these live streams that we've been doing over a year and a half now, because first of all, I don't have to do any painting. And I just get to look at all the stuff that you guys have been doing. So it's for most of the show, it's sort of me broadcasting out to you, and here it's sort of like you're responding and showing me what you've been doing. And so it's a good reminder that I'm not just talking into the void, that there's people like yourself on the other side of the intertubes who are interacting with me. So that is awesome. I'm super excited. So let's take a look. Let's just dive right in. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to start off by looking at the work that you guys have done in response to the paintings that I've been making, and then we're going to look at all the artworks you guys have made outside of class on your own, inspired by things that you're inspired by, right? So let's just I saw this posted on here. Donna put on just a few weeks ago, saying amazed at how her daughter's so amazed at how great all the work that everyone is doing and how great everyone is at painting. And that makes me so excited that a stranger would open up. And I mean, it's a stranger, no offense, Donna, but someone that may not be necessarily part of the group or part of this community would look at the work that's on the Facebook group and go like, wow, this is really, really great. And while I just remind myself, there is this private Facebook group just for people like yourself, and all of the images that we're going to be looking at today were posted to the Facebook group. So if you want us to look at your work and you want me to give you some feedback, please join the Facebook group and upload your work to it. Okay, so I also want to just maybe begin by looking at these two paintings by Lori. So this is a painting that she made based on Vincent van Gogh. This is Cafe Terrace at Night, or Cafe Terrace at Night. And then so this was the original version that she painted, and then this is her updated version that she just posted a couple days ago onto the Facebook group. And I just wanted to show this to inspire everyone that, you know, a painting can continue based upon the feedback that I give, based upon your own sort of intuitive feeling when you look at the painting and you think like, there's something missing. What is it? And often that's something that comes out of the discussions that we have in these classes. Now, I will say, and Lori mentioned that I said that this painting was fine, it was great, you should probably just leave it alone because it's awesome. But perhaps based on some of the other things I was saying about other people's paintings, she said, you know what, maybe there is something I could do a little bit more to it. And so you can see most prominently she worked on this area of the painting, and then a little bit up in the above here. So if we go back, and I think it does make a huge difference. You can see that adding this warmer yellow, you know, it's a little bit orangey, right? That warm yellow. It gives this the whole cafe a bit more of a warmer, maybe more inviting kind of a quality, right? And it also makes the light seem even brighter, right? Because now we've got sort of like a hot spot of the light. And it's kind of funny to think of like, but wait, why is the hot spot yellow, like cooler yellow, because the cooler yellow tends to look brighter, right? So often when things get really, really hot, they actually get cold, right? Which is, again, something that doesn't quite make a lot of sense, but if you think of like the inside of a flame can turn blue because it's so hot, right? So yeah, I think a really great instinct there. I think that was really smart of you, Lori. So I want to show this right off the top, that maybe based upon something that I'm saying today that might make you think of following Lori's lead and just tweaking your painting a little bit. And I know that there's a lot of people who watch these episodes that haven't uploaded images to the Facebook group, that are just sort of hiding a little bit in the background, which is totally fine, and are watching these episodes for some clues at how they might improve their own paintings, right? So that's, which I think is great, right? You don't necessarily have to be uploading your pictures to be able to get something out of today's episode. So I just want to continue here, because this is where we left off with Doris McCarthy, and this is another painting that Lori did. And so this is, I think it's called Starred Ice, and it's a picture that Doris McCarthy made of the Arctic while flying over top of the Arctic ice and mountains in a small plane. And this painting is a little bit unfinished. Now there's still this yellow coming through, and I think she said something in the post about, often I see that yellow coming through and maybe my paint is too thin, I need to paint thicker, and I also feel a little bit anxious about doing some more bold brush strokes, I guess, was sort of the what I got out of this. And I think also she mentioned maybe a little bit of a fear of obliterating the pencil lines, which are, all of those things are very typical. I would probably imagine most people watching have that same sort of feeling. You know, when we've got an outline you've traced on there, it's like, oh, I don't want the outline to disappear because then I'm going to be totally lost. I totally, completely understand, right? That's a natural sort of feeling. I would say that a painting like this, you know, paintings that have faces in them, it's a little bit harder to let go, because then you really do feel like you're a little bit lost if you don't know where exactly to put the eye or the nose, because then that could really change the likeness of that person, and it may no longer look exactly like the original, right? That could be more stressful. But I would say that a painting like this, you know, it offers us the opportunity to be a little bit more expressive. And so, for instance, if this line goes up instead of down, or this line connects here instead of here, will anybody notice? Will anybody care? Even if they're familiar with the original, will it make that much of a difference? I would say no. And so I think, Lori, what I would say with a painting like this is allow yourself the freedom to just think of the outline as the basic part of the composition, and that you can sort of paint outside of the lines, right? To use that old cliche, right? That there might be times where I can understand why you really, really want to hold on to the outline, but allow yourself the freedom to paint outside of them and to obliterate them, and then to challenge yourself to find them again, and or to create them where they may not exist, or where they've never existed, and to use your imagination in that way, right? So you shouldn't feel like a prisoner of the outline. Okay, so now let's go to Anna Mulka Ahmed, who we painted 2 artworks by her. I loved those paintings. This is one of my favorite episodes that we have done. This was in response to a number of people saying, I want to know how to use a palette knife. Let's paint with a palette knife. And even though palette knives are not something I have painted with that often, I've used palette knives for mixing paint, which is the whole purpose of a palette knife is you mix paint on your palette, generally with that knife, and you get it all mixed up into a nice little mixture, and then you paint with a brush. But Anamolka Ahmed is a great example of an artist who painted with the palette knife and had these great textures. Unfortunately, it looks like there's only 2 people that made paintings based on that episode. I would strongly recommend that those of you watching right now go back to that episode. I think it was a lot of fun. We used some thick paint. I also used, I think it was in this paint, some heavy matte gel, and that heavy matte gel is really fun. Like this is that, right? Heavy matte gel. So it's a nice thick gooey substance, and when you mix it into your paint, it helps you keep that texture, right? So that was a lot of fun. So looking at Heidi's here, I love this this painting. Really great job. This is the one of the university that she painted. I found this one to be, oddly enough, a little bit trickier than the other one of what was his name? Sufi Wakar was the portrait she painted of his. You got all the colors in here. I also like that you added this kind of grayish burgundy border around your painting to frame it like that. Oops. That's kind of a nice little addition that you put on there. And it is funny to think of a painting like this that has so much color in it. How would you frame that painting? Very cool. I'm really excited that you took that challenge on, Heidi. Paula also approached this painting without using all the texture. I don't know if did you use a palette knife here, Paula? It's hard to tell. I can see kind of some very square, but these could be just a square brush. What's fun about this is I feel like a sense of movement, like all of these lines, even though this looks like maybe a palette knife up here perhaps, but I really feel a sense of movement in this painting. Same here. You're the only one who did this painting of the portrait here. This is one of Anamolka Ahmed's students that she painted, and I think you did a great job as well, right? You know, it's funny, like a painting like this, trying to paint it without all the texture is almost more difficult than painting it with all the texture, because then you really have to make some decisions as to where the lines go. When it's all kind of goopy, it's you can kind of get away with a lot, which, you know, is something we talked about in that episode, is I think maybe that was one of the things that Anamolka Ahmed was doing deliberately, is using that high textured paint in order to have a little bit more freedom of expression. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Paul Kane here, and we've got 2 paintings of this image here. So here's Paula's and Eleanor's, and then the other Paul Kane that we did of Fort Edmonton. Here's Paula's and Maria's. So let's go back up to Paula's to start here. Again, this is one of the most famous paintings in Canadian art history, and I believe this is at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and a really seminal, important artwork for Paul Kane too. And we talked all about that in episode, so I'm not going to go into it, but this one was a lot of fun to do. It was a little bit tricky because there's a lot of detail, and it was one of the longer episodes. I think probably 5 hours or so I spent working on this one. And but I'm really pleased, Paula. Again, Paula, you're one of the few artists that does not use the outlines, and that you just go and start painting directly into your sketchbook here. And so the fact that you were able to get all of these elements in the picture makes me super, super happy. I like that you're using these cool colors in the background and some warmer colors in the foreground to get that depth. I think it worked out really, really well. You know, obviously it's a little bit tricky to get all the detail in the face. But nevertheless, really great job here. Feels very cold. Let's go to Eleanor's version of the painting. Wow, great job too. Wow, I love this nice cold sky back there. It really gives us a lot of depth when we use those warm and cool colors to create foreground and backgrounds. It just creates all of this depth, and I think you really pulled it off in this painting. I love the snow on the trees. This tree is really well executed, particularly up here. And the dogs, really well done. I really like the depth, too. I really get this sense of moving deep into here. And you manage to get all these little figures in here. That's great. Really cool. Wow. I don't have anything like what I don't know what I would say about this. Yeah, looks great. I mean, I guess if small little things is we could do a little bit of glazing just to darken, put a little bit of shadows like on his jacket, and same with this fellow here, and potentially even underneath the dogs. I can't remember how much of that was in the original or how much I did myself, so but just to give it that extra little bit more depth, I think that's something you could do. Let's go to the other painting here by Paul Kane, the Fort Edmonton. That's great. I feel like this works really well. You've got that line, the pathway leading up the hill to the fort, overlooking the river there. Really well done. I think there's some pretty rocky cliffs here, which I think, you know, a little bit of warm yellow I think we could get. Like if we look, yeah, so here Maria has a little bit more of the rocky cliffs in here. Again, really nice use of warm colors and then cooler colors as we go further back. I like the blending in the sky and this big yellow sun blazing through. It almost makes me feel, and this is not in the original, but the way that the sun is painted, I almost want to see some beams of light coming out, shooting through these clouds. We did that in the Thomas Cole painting. There was a little bit of those beams of light shooting through the clouds. That's a little bit, not too tricky. You could even do it with a little glaze, but that works out really well. So I think, Paula, a little bit of those cliffs, it's almost like a skin tone. That sandy, beachy color could look really nice, but you don't have to do anything. But it just does you can see how well it worked in Maria's painting. Anything I want to suggest here? You know, one thing I would suggest maybe is, you know, these bushes that are right here along the front, I would consider making them a little bit darker. So right now it looks like there's a bit of white in some of the foreground elements, and I think that's causing a little bit of flattening of the space, because that whenever we add white to a color, it dulls it and sort of pushes it a little bit further back, which is why it can be a little tricky having kind of white tinted things in the foreground. But I would think, like, if we added like a darker color, you know, that dark color that we make using cool blue, warm red, and cool yellow, if we mixed that into a green, or even some black, right? A little bit of black, because the black will sit right on the surface, right? Black just sort of goes right to the front. So that might also help pull the foreground closer to the viewer. Because right now it's sort of like on a pendulum and it's kind of swinging backwards, right? It almost seems like this is the closest thing to us here. And adding a little bit of that darker color along this edge and in here, I think would be really helpful. Wonderful. Okay, let's continue along here. So we're going to look at the artwork of Matthew Wong. And I think Matthew Wong's work has been some of the most popular work of all the artists that we've looked at over the past year and a half. And I think it was Charmé who pointed this artist out to me, who I was totally unfamiliar with, but this is one of the things that makes me so happy about doing these episodes, is to have people who are suggesting ideas to me and opening my eyes to other artists. And this is a perfect example. Matthew Wong, I think, was an incredible artist, and unfortunately took his own life only after like 5 years or so, or even less, of being a professional artist. And man, it's what a tragedy. You think, like, if he had only been able to see how his artwork has affected so many other people, maybe he would have made a few different decisions. Anyway, Heidi, this is great. So I think there's just this 2 different versions uploaded here. I don't know if there's any difference between them. One's just on a darker background. Let's go through all of these here. Just go back up, back down. I think it's so neat seeing all these different paintings and everyone's interpretation of them. So here's Charmé. This is a painting. So Charmé, the one that she did, we'll look at here in a moment. But this is the one based on Matthew Wong's painting called A Dream. I love what you've done here, Charmé. This is great. All of the detailed line work. I like that you painted all of these lines dark and then went over top of them with this lighter color. And it doesn't obliterate the dark underneath. In fact, it almost gives it the look of like the white lines, or not the white lines, but the lighter lines have been outlined with a dark line. What an effective technique. That is fantastic. And then we look down here in the ground, like, this is certainly time consuming, all of these marks down here. But wow, look at how that pays off. Right? And it's not overly complicated. It just takes a bit of time, a little bit of patience, but it really gives this wonderful sense of complexity, of detail in there. Really nice, beautiful. All these little dots. I can't even remember if that was in the original, if that's one of your own editions. And great sky. Look at how nice and subtle that is. Really wonderful. Man, you guys are getting good. Holy smokes. Here's Sandra's painted version, right? I get the sense from Sandra's here that this was done much faster, right? So unlike Charmé's, where we have that very slow approach, very careful approach to painting, here we have a much more spontaneous, gestural approach to the painting. Right, it might also have taken a little bit, maybe they took the same length of time, because we see there's lots of buildup in paint here. But it just has a different feeling for the viewer, and by viewer I mean myself. One painting feels like slower, this one feels more excited, right? And the speed of these brushstrokes, these S's in the trees, it almost gives me the feeling of sort of racing through the countryside, right? Driving through the country in a car, versus Charmé's, where I feel like I'm going for a slow, calm walk. Right? I love that. Very cool. I feel like there's something maybe missing right in here. And, not that I'm not, and when I say that, not that you don't have to return to the original, but I feel like maybe it's a little bit of a lighter color or another darker tree or something here. And maybe there is something there, and I'm getting a funny reflection, and it does look a little bit out of focus in parts here. So that could also be, I might not be seeing the image to its full wonderful quality. Here's Paula's version. Wow. Also, like, I like all these little tiny white marks on here. I wonder if this is an acrylic pen. Huh. Different colors, a lot more green, and the yellow here is very dominant. You know, in the original Matthew Wong painting, the sky is sort of this little sliver right down the middle, and instead what you've decided to do is to really open that sky up and allow us to see much more of it, and you've done a pretty good job of blending. And oops, and so it doesn't have the claustrophobic quality that I think the original might have, where we feel like we're a little bit enclosed by the trees, whereas this one feels like there's a lot more space, right? Really cool. I like that. I think you've done a great job here, Paula. Let's look at Maria's painting here. Wow, I love the sky. I like this kind of peachy, orangey kind of sky you got, and all of the trees turned out really, really well. That is really nice. I love how this turned out here. Really cool job, Maria. Let's just zoom in a bit come on. Huh. That is really nice. You know, it's interesting seeing that juxtaposed to the other artists we've looked at already. You know, like Charmai's going over the lines. Come on. So you have gone over the lines, but you've also sort of gone between the lines, overlapping some lines, and then you've even gone back over and darkened the lines. So it's just a totally different feeling. Totally different feeling, right? And the density of marks down here. Very cool. I like that a lot, Maria. So far I don't really have much suggestions for you guys, because you guys are doing a great job. Wow. Lori, wow. This turned out really exceptional on this side. Again, same sort of thing like what Charmai had done that we looked at first there, except much more subtle effect, right? So here, you know, Charmai's, it almost looks like in Charmai's that you're using, let's say, like the back end of a paintbrush, right? And using that to dig into the paint and peel, or not peel, but scrape the paint away, which is very hard to do in acrylic paint. Obviously in oil paint you can do that, but you really get that sense here, where in Lori's it's much more subtle. So you've done it, but not nearly as bright as what Charmai did. Very cool. I love this sky. Perfect blending. Really, really nice. Great job. And all these little tiny dots, you know, painting dots is hard to do, right? And you did a great job doing that. Not so easy. Wow, and Heidi's version. Yeah. It's interesting. So Heidi's has a bit more of a dry brush quality in places. Really cool. I like how this turned out. And I've noticed that, like, this is a kind of almost a feature of your paintings, Heidi. There's that little bit of a drier brush, and by that I mean that in a great way. There's obviously dry brushes is a technique that artists have been using for 1,000 years, particularly in Chinese painting, Korean painting, and some Japanese painting in particular. But really, I like how that, I generally, personally, I always really like a very, very smooth surface when I paint. But it seems like you kind of are into a little bit of that texture. Like, that kind of thing would just drive me bonkers. But it seems like you're able to embrace that. Really cool. Yeah, this turned out great. And I think what I like here is, instead you've got this fairly light blue, and then you're going darker over top of it. Anyway, I think all that works out really well. These turned out great. I'm so excited by these paintings. Okay, there are lots of comments here in the chat. Look at everyone here. There's Amy, B, there's Maria, Lolly, Heidi, Carlito. Wow. Everyone's happy to be here, saying hello to everyone. Heidi says, thank you, Michael, for taking the time to review our works. Again, such an exciting time and great learning opportunity. I did revise my 3 paintings as per your comments, but I haven't uploaded them. Okay, well, next time we'll take a look at your more recent versions. So I can't wait to see those and how they turned out. Carlito says, I just finished my statue painting. Can you critique it to see how I can improve on it? Thanks. Also, this is Josh typing. Okay. I think it's coming up there. If you put it up over the past, couple of hours, it's there. But if if you just posted it, you'll have to wait till next time. But I think there's, if I recall, we'll take a look at it once we get to those paintings. Okay, so here's Maria's painting here. Well, this is the other Matthew Wong painting. Let's look at all 3 of them here. This is Charmaine's. She did this. She was, again, this is the painting that I saw that she did that opened my eyes to Matthew Wong. And I think there's another version where we see more of the painting here, but I like this one that you included here because it's kind of nice that it's almost like this plant is a part of the actual painting itself. And I think paintings should become part of your living space, right? That's, often why artists make paintings, is so that they can integrate themselves into people's living environments and they become part of people's environment, right? So really cool seeing that like that. And the plant works really well with that red, right? And so let's go back to Sandra's, Paula's, and Maria's. Cool. So let's start here with Maria. Turned out really great. I love the detail that especially in here, and then all these little dots. Wow, that turned out really great. And I can also see all the little dots in the shadow too. So you really worked on this painting and you got a lot in here. It's in these areas, these little dots, in the shadows or the darker areas of the painting. Often a lot of other artists are like, well, it's dark, can't really see anything there, so what's the point of working in that area? It's just a waste of time. Which I can, and yes, it's true. Most people spend somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds looking at the greatest paintings on earth in the Louvre and the Metropolitan Museum and the Pushkin Museum, right? So you're like, if people are going to spend 5 seconds looking at the masterpieces made by the most famous artists alive, they're probably not going to spend that much time looking at my painting. And that can be true. But I think we should all aspire to be making paintings that will hold people's attention for as long as possible. And part of that is to reward people to look into the painting a little bit closer and into those darker areas. Like when we look at the Rembrandt painting where most of his face is in shadow and you can't really at first see his eyes, and then you look at it and then you see the eyes appear out of the shadow. It's like, whoa! That's really exciting. It's really exciting as a viewer to have the painting sort of like a Polaroid picture, like expose in front of your eyes, right? So really great job here, Maria. I'm so proud of you for spending all that time on this. Here's Paula's painting here. Again, lots of detail down here. I get a sense of speed in the way the brush strokes are happening here, which I really, really like. And I'm always amazed, again, I'll say it over and over today, Paula, the fact that you're painting these without any outlines and you're just eyeballing it and drawing it and then painting it is awesome. Because most people would say, well, I don't have a printer. Why bother trying to do any of these paintings? It's not going to look exactly like the original or like Michael's doing. So I'm going to sit this out. You never give yourself any excuses to procrastinate. You are inspiration to me, Paula, that you keep on doing these despite that. So great job. good use of color. You mixed all the great, like, these warm colors in the foreground and this cool colors in the windows. It looks fantastic. Really, really great job. I also really like the way that you've painted the chairs and the table. Right, they have like it's really has a Matisse like kind of quality in the way that he flattened shapes like that. Let's look at Sandra's painting here. Cool. Again, like all the little details in the shadows. I also get a sense of like speed in the way that like some of these lines are painted. You know, there's a freedom and gestural kind of quality which is working really, really nice. Very cool. Yeah, I don't know what to say about any of these. I don't really have any comments to make on any of these. They're all turned out really great so far. Okay, let's just keep on going. I want to look at some more of Matthew Wong's paintings. And so these are ones that you guys have done sort of on your own, inspired by other paintings he did, because we only did 2 paintings of his in class. So this is the original that Heidi posted from the exhibition. And then this is her version of it. Wow, that's really cool. I hadn't seen this painting before. And it makes me really wish I had seen that show, that I wish I had been out in Toronto to see that exhibition. I don't believe that it's traveling anywhere else. I haven't heard anything about it. Yeah. I just look. Hard to see from the originals, kind of so small, but yeah, it looks great. Just trying to see from his point. According to his painting, it looks, you know, bang on. You've done an exceptional job. I mean, if it was my painting, I'd probably be inclined to add a little bit more volume to these balls and to give a little bit more of a shadow on one side. But that's not what he did, and so I can just totally, it makes sense that you didn't make any changes. Oh, so here's Paula's version with both the paintings side by side. One thing I would say, Paula, is it makes me a little bit anxious, like when you're painting acrylic paint on 2 pages of a sketchbook, even after they've dried, if there's any moisture in the room, they can get in between, and then the acrylic paint will stick to other acrylic paint. And then if you try to peel those pages apart, you may have already noticed that sometimes they actually tear the paper, or parts of one painting comes off onto the other painting. So I'd be a little bit, I would discourage this as much as possible. And if you are thinking of doing more of this, is to consider putting something in between these pages before you close them, like wax paper, or what's known as like glassine, which is like a really thin so like glassine is often like an archival museum. It kind of feels like wrapping paper that you would put inside of like a gift bag or something, but it's a little bit more expensive, and it's archival, so it'll never yellow or anything like that. So that would be my recommendation, because I think you're doing great work, and it would be a shame for them to get ruined. Let's continue on here. Sandra, great painting. I like that. Another Matthew Wong painting that you've reinterpreted. Very cool. Looks like Charmaine did that same painting as well. And I don't know what the difference is between the same. I think it's, have you changed anything? It's a little bit more red, but then this other one looks like it's a little bit darker. I think it's just the lighting that makes that a little bit different. Here's Sandra's. We see them together. I love that. I love seeing everyone's, where your studios are and where you're painting, and that's cool. Looks like somebody's playing video games in the background. Here's another one that Charmaine did. Cool. I love these, the way that he did and the way that you've done the brush strokes of the rain coming through. What an incredible artist, man. What a loss. What a loss that you know, that he's no longer here to experience and to continue growing. Who knows what he would have done and where he would have grown to. And this is Charmaine's, all of her paintings on the couches here. They all, it looks like a bunch of house guests or something, right? All gathered together to for tea, afternoon tea or something. They each have their own personalities. That's cool. This one at the bottom here, I hadn't seen that one either. Man, that guy was cranking out the paintings. It is amazing. Anyway, really great work, everyone. Fantastic job. Very, very good. Let's, I'm going to keep on plowing ahead here. And let's look at the work of Kathleen Munn. So Kathleen Munn, if you recall, was really Canada's first and only Cubist painter. And so we see 4 versions of this painting. We've got Eleanor's, Laurie's, Paula's, and Vanya's. So we'll start with Vanya. This one, it's really, you know, it's so interesting how this one, the colors are a little bit muted. It seems like there's a little bit of white in almost every color here, which is fine. It does, again, it reduces the saturation. It makes everything just slightly pastel. But I also think it gives it a really interesting quality. It makes it looks, what would be the way of describing it? Well, I guess, in a way, it reminds me of like a stained glass window, because the darker areas that don't have white, let's say like some of these browns, become much more prominent. So the line work is elevated because all the other colors, the majority of them have white and they're tinted, and therefore kind of seem to recede a little back. When we put white into a color, it's like as if we're adding a little bit of atmosphere to it. I think it turned out really cool, though. I like how this one works. Let's look at Paula's version. Wow, this, when we break it up like this, in the way that you've done this here, it really becomes way more abstract. Right, we can see there's a figure right here, but all the other elements become very obscured. Huh. You know, it's interesting, Paula. I think it might be fun to try doing a little bit of extra line work around here and taking like that brown and just not outlining everything, but just a few small places, a little line here and there could help. Not that it, I mean, again, one of the big things with Cubism is trying to walk that fine line between recognizability and full-on abstraction or non-representation, right? And your painting here is definitely moving more into the non-representational space, where any identifiable features are barely visible, right? Which is, you know, again, it's totally fine. It's just how easily do you want us to be able to find this figure? Like if we were to, for instance, rotate the figure, I was going to say we wouldn't be able to see anything, but now I actually see these legs a little bit more. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to go up here to Laurie's. Wow, so this is the difference. Here's Laurie's painting, and we can see all of these colors are pretty much highly saturated. We have a lot of pigment if there's white in there, there might be very little white. Like, I don't sense there's much white in any of these. Maybe in some of these you can see how they're pastel-y, versus here Vanya's, we can see how much more white is in all of these colors. Although what's nice is some of this brown base layer coming through. And we have that again in this painting too. I like this kind of the thin colors. It is very much like a stylistic quality that the Cubist painters used. Really nice. It really glows. This really makes me feel like stained glass. Like, I really feel that there's that light beaming in through the painting. It's like it's glowing from the inside out. Those colors are so bright. And then, wow, Eleanor's, and it looks like Eleanor may have used an acrylic pen to maybe go around some of these shapes, or very carefully painting them, and has made a decision also to, by putting these little things like fingers and stuff in there, and right here, it makes it more recognizable that there's humanoid figures in here, right? So, you know, if I was to say which one is more represent, like if we think of a scale of from photorealist painting, and then we go from photo, like it looks like the original, right? We start photorealist, and then we start abstracting the image and slowly get more and more abstract until we get to this point where no longer is abstract, even though you could say full abstract painting, and then it goes into non-representation, right? Just shapes and colors that don't really look like anything beyond shapes and colors, right? So we think of this as this spectrum, right? I would say like Eleanor's is maybe kind of closer, you know, we can still recognize some things here. And then maybe we've got Laurie's here. We can see, I think the juxtaposition of some of these brighter colors and the duller colors really helps us see some of the figures. And then we go to Vanya's here, where some of these, it becomes pretty obscure as to what's a figure and what's not a figure. Like we can see maybe an arm here, maybe a foot. And then we go to Paula's, where it's like almost complete non-representation. Very cool. Great job. Okay, let's just keep on moving forward. This train, let's keep it running. Wow, lots of comments and stuff. Paula says, it's exciting to view our club's creations. Lolly says, you guys are so talented. I love seeing all these creations. Lolly says, Paula, I had no idea you did all of these without any outlines at all. What an achievement. And Paula says, I waited until they stayed dry before I closed the book. Any suggestions? Oh, about yeah, again, even if you wait for those pages to dry, it's actually, what I find is after the pages dry is when they can start, you know, acrylic paint, you know, it does technically dry very, very fast, unlike oil paintings, which dry much slower. But the one thing with oil paint is when oil paint is finally dry, it is, you can put any oil paint up face to face with another oil painting, and they're safe. Oil paint is generally, you know, it's not going to stick to any other surface. Whereas acrylic paint, I don't know what it is about acrylic paint, but if there's another acrylic painting stuck, like I noticed this, you know, when I've got all my paintings, and probably a bunch of you have noticed this too, if you've got a bunch of them on a shelf, kind of just stacked, you know, back to, like, you know, you put another painting in behind this one, you have a whole bunch of them, and then you want to flip through them like, I don't know, like record albums or books. You might notice some of them stick together, and you're kind of like, ooh, and you pull them apart, and they go bang, and you can hear things tearing and ripping and sticking, and it gets even worse if they're face to face, right? So even though they're dry, and it does look like you put a lot of water into your paintings, and that probably will help, but it's it's just probably, it does make me anxious, right? If I, you know, I would hate for any of your paintings to be ruined. Sandra says, "Hi, Michael. I'm checking in to say hi. Going to dinner and opening gallery reception for Ben Steyer tonight in LA. Very excited. He's one of my favorite artists." That's cool. Paul says, "As you introduced the acrylic paint markers, I went to the art store and bought a box of 24 water-based ones." That's awesome. Lori says, "I use mostly golden paint. Do you think that's why my colors look brighter?" And Sandra says, "Thank you for reviewing my work." Lori says, I don't think you're saying, why do these colors look bright? I don't think they're brighter because of the brand of paint. I think it's just because you're mixing the paint without adding white to it. So if we look at Vanya's, there's white being added to all these colors, which is dulling the color. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just this is the result. That's the effect you're going to get. Like, if we were to put these two paintings side by side up in, you know, a store and they were the same price, some people would prefer this one and some people would prefer this one. You know, it's a matter of taste, right? So just different people have different tastes. So it's not the brand of paint, it's just the way that the paint is being used, the way it's being mixed. Okay, let's move on here. We'll look at another one of Kathleen Munn's paintings. And we have, again, 4 different versions here. Very cool. Where should we start? We'll just start right here with Heidi's. Very cool. So it looks like, again, a little bit thinner application of paint and a little bit of dry brush in a few places. It almost, I was going to say watercolor. It almost looks like watercolor, except we have a few areas that are more opaque, where again there's some white mixed into the paint. Almost, is this painted on paper, perhaps? I don't know. Not that it makes much of a difference, but it does look like it's a very smooth surface, unlike some other paintings that Heidi's done, which have a lot more texture coming through. I think this turned out great. Like, allowing yourself to leave these spaces, you know, that leave them white and not paint color right up against color is tricky. This is one of the reasons why I think Kathleen Munn was a master. Is, you know, most people cannot bear leaving those areas like what you've done here, Heidi. I think it's turned out really, really nice. Really cool. Great version. Wow. And then here's Lori's version. A little bit different, right? A little bit more defined, right? It also feels like it was done a little bit slower and a little bit more carefully. And so everything's sort of fast. It's like puzzle pieces, and they facet together very, very well. You know, as opposed to, let's say, Heidi's here is done in a much looser kind of style, a little bit more like Matisse, versus this one, I don't know how I would describe it. I mean, it actually even feels a little bit more refined than Kathleen Munn's version. I mean, I like both of these a lot, you guys. These are great. Like, this just blows my mind that you guys are out there doing these. I every night I say to my wife, like, this is just, I don't even know what, I'm just blown away, like, that there's this level of engagement. Here's May's version, and this, is that pastel? Oh yeah, soft pastel. I made a note of it right there. Very cool. It's kind of funny to me, in a way, to use soft pastel to do cubist paintings, because soft pastel it can be something that's kind of hard to control, because there's lots of powder and it's very easy to smudge, And Cubist paintings tend to be more rigid and more controlled. So the fact that you've been able to do this painting with soft pastels is an achievement. That's pretty amazing, May. Wow. I like that a lot. Very cool. One of the things I would say, it looks like we've got a bit of texture, almost like a cardboard, corrugated cardboard, these lines. Do you see these vertical lines going through here? What I like about, I think that's really kind of neat. It almost makes me think of the potential for amplifying that. And not only, and actually turning the paper to get, you know, let's say we did have, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is, I'm just projecting or seeing things, but these vertical lines that look like like as if you were doing this on top of a piece of cardboard, or there's a cardboard underneath your paper as like a support or something. What I would think about doing is doing that, but then turning the paper a little bit so that we could get these lines going, not just straight up and down, but also going in different directions, which is very much of like a cubist sort of approach. Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with this drawing, but now when we see something like that, like that's kind of the definition of like a Bob Ross happy accident. When you see that texture coming through and think like, huh, look at this texture. Like, what if instead of this being a problem, we really embrace it and use it as part of the process? That could be really, really exciting. And then we'll move here to Paula's. This turned out great, Paula. Right? Like, there's something, you know, it's very interesting the way that you've executed this painting. Like, the way that you've done this hand in particular, like this hand, even this hand, there's something, oops, I really like about that a lot. I mean, it is a little bit different. Like, the face feels almost a little bit unfinished. You know, like if we look at Laurie's or Heidi's or May's, you know, even mostly particularly here May's, we see how the face, we've got all this line work in here, and I think like May, this turned out so great. I am tempted to say that maybe the face could have a little bit more work applied to it, because look at how I love this hand, the way that there's these very delicate little darker lines. Maybe there's a acrylic pen involved here, and I think not painting anything more, but potentially, but just maybe doing a little bit of outlining here in the same way that you've done here, kind of taking a little bit of inspiration from May and maybe Laurie here in particular. I think you could really take this and that little bit of extra line work, which you could also continue into the background. It doesn't have to be just the face, but I think I could see a little bit more of that really making a massive improvement on this painting, which I think is already pretty good. Okay, let's move on to Agnes Martin here. How are we doing with time? Not bad. Okay. So here's Paula's Agnes Martin. This is the untitled version. And here's Eleanor's version as well. And I think, was it Heidi? Someone posted on the Facebook that this painting just sold for like $40 million at auction. So someone probably saw our live stream and was like, whoa, this is a great painting. I better put it up for sale while the market is hot. Everyone's excited about Agnes Martin and this painting in particular. We've got to take advantage of this moment. So, you know, I'll take all the credit for helping to increase the value of this painting. Anyway, I thought this was, you know, deceptively difficult painting. you know, the way we did it with many very thin glazes to get a very particular kind of a look that I kind of think reminds me a little bit of like water, like looking through, you know, because if you have a very, very thin puddle, and one of my daughter's favorite thing to do is stomp in puddles. I spend about 2 hours every day just standing next to my daughter watching her stomp in puddles. So I've had a lot of time to look at puddles and to think about puddles and to, you know, consider every facet of how puddles behave. So when I see, you know, this Agnes Martin painting, I think a lot about like how she was using thin paint at times. She also used thicker paint, but at times using really thin paint. And by building up those very, very thin layers, it creates like a depth, and we're looking through those layers of paint just as we're looking through a puddle down to the, you know, the sidewalk or the road or whatever underneath. And it's a, you know, it's using the exact same method that Leonardo used to paint the Mona Lisa, but here Agnes Martin is using it to make a non-representational painting, right? I think it's turned out really great. I really like this, Eleanor. And it almost like there's a little bit of like drips, or maybe that's just in the gesso or the first layer we put down, but I like that kind of stuff. And if you recall, when we were talking about Agnes Martin, she also embraced that kind of wabi-sabi, the imperfections. Really good. Really cool. Let's look at Eleanor's here. So this is the other Agnes Martin painting, the self-portrait that she did about 10 years prior, I think, to the untitled painting that, again, sold for a lot of money recently. And here's Heidi's version and Paula's version. Huh. It's so interesting how like her expression looks kind of different in each one of these. Like in Paula's here, her look is sort of like a, you know, just like a little bit like her eyebrows being up like she's not angry and not, but just sort of maybe slightly skeptical. Here in Heidi's one, she seems kind of pretty, kind of like she's thinking about something pretty intense, pretty serious. Her gaze is looking down a little bit, right? And then in Eleanor's one, she's more just like kind of looking right at us, right? This is like my wife after I've said like 5 or 6 dad jokes in a row here. And then this is like my wife after a whole day's worth of dad jokes. And then this is the reaction my daughter gives, which is like, whatever. Anyway, so let's just start here with Eleanor's version. So a fairly thick application of paint, like this opaque quality of paint here, and then we got some thinner and thick parts of the painting. I think it turned out really well. Like, I actually just want to brighten this up here. Let me... Okay. Okay, now I can see a bit more of the painting coming through. That I think makes it's probably much closer to the way it actually looked, and now I feel a lot better about it too. I don't know what I could say because I think it looks really good. It does. It's almost. Well, let's take a look at Heidi's And again, much more of that dry brush. So this is something we've talked about a number of times, the way that Heidi paints. You know, again, it's a great example of two different approaches to painting here, right? Eleanor's much thicker application of paint, very little dry brush, except maybe at the very edges of the painting. And then Heidi's, where we've got dry brush almost everywhere in the painting, even on the face. And I think it works really, really well for this particular Agnes Martin painting, that bit of dry brush. Because it's funny how it reminds me in a way of, you know, Agnes Martin's abstract paintings. That there's a bit of a shimmering kind of... everything is slightly undefined, even though there's these lines here. So what I would say, Eleanor, is you know, just when it comes to Agnes Martin's painting, bringing a little bit more of what we have here into this painting, and having a little bit more of that thin paint, like I think especially around the eyes. Like I think that's what I'm thinking. Like what I would consider doing is adding a little bit of either... What color would you put in here? Almost like the same flesh tone, and just glazing, and just taking a bit of the intensity of the white of the eyes out, because they're so white that they become kind of cartoony, right? Whereas I don't think that's the intent of Agnes Martin, and I don't think it's your intent either. And so that would be my suggestion, is to get this white edges is a little bit distracting. Like, so for instance, when we look here, Heidi's done a pretty good job of there's not white, but it's slightly off white, and it makes it a little bit more believable. Like even if you're just looking at my eyes right now, there's really the only white of my eye is the reflections from the lights bouncing off my eyes. Otherwise, my eyeballs are kind of gray and yellow and whatever, veins and all sorts of other things, right? Blues and other colors that are reflecting. But often it's also like my flesh tones, because light is hitting my nose, bouncing off into my eyes, right? And that's giving it a bit of slightly pinky gray kind of quality. So I think that works really, really well here with Heidi. And I think with Eleanor, that's what I would do. And I think that would make a huge improvement on this painting, which I think is already great. Other thing, I do feel like I want... Do I want it to be slightly darker under that chin? Maybe. Maybe. I could see almost even using the same color you might put on the eye, just doing a little tiny... Just because... It starts to, when there's little definition between the chin and the neck, it can make somebody's neck kind of come back a bit. All right, so we've got a little bit of that right here. Great job, both of you. And then with Paula here, that's awesome. Right, I also really like the way you did the background here, Paula. Really cool. I like this kind of yellow above her eyes is kind of like an eyeshadow, or I don't know what the makeup terms are for that those highlights. It's kind of nice. And what's nice is you've taken that same yellow and you've brought it down like onto the rest of her body, and that's pretty bold. It's a very bold choice, because it's very easy for a yellow like that to become dominant, and for when you do that on a face, for that to make the face look sickly and unhealthy. But I think one thing you've done to counteract that is some of these more pinkish flesh tones over top of it, which, you know, prevent that from happening. It makes it look like a stylistic choice that we've got the yellow, not a description of someone who's unhealthy, right? So really smart, great choices in here. Way to go, Paula. And then you've got both of them side by side. Very cool. Just want to go back here. turn that to the original. Okay. Oh, Heidi says that this painting sold for $17.7 million US just the other day. So I'm waiting for Sotheby's or Christie's or whoever was auctioning that painting. You know, if you want to kick me $1 million or $2 back for helping with the sale of that painting, I will not complain. I mean, I will reluctantly accept 5%. No more than 5, 6, 7 if you must, but you know, let's move on here and look at the great artist Titian and his painting of Daniel Barbaro, and which is, I think, one of the only Titian paintings in Canada. I think it is the only Titian painting in a Canadian collection. And I think, and it's acknowledged as one of his more important paintings too. So let's look through. How many do we have? We got a bunch. So this one. Let's go back up. Wow. How about we start here with Paula's? And boy, oh boy, that looks. I like this painting a lot, Paula. What does it make me think of? You know what it reminds me of is the actor Benedict Cumberbatch in the as Doctor Strange in the Marvel movie. He's got like that same kind of facial hair and almost like the collar that's flipped up, because this looks maybe a little bit less like a beard and more of like a tunic, or like, you know, you know, like a, what do you call that? One of those kind of sweaters with the neck that comes right up. I don't know why that word escapes me, but that's what this kind of reminds. So, you know, I think if you really want to integrate this beard into the face a little more, it would be defining the difference between the beard and the clothing, because having them this same kind of like crimson red, dark crimson, blood kind of color, they kind of bleed into one, and it's not clear as to where one begins and where the other one starts, or where one ends where one begins, right? So like if we look at Joshua's here, like, you know, that's what we're talking about, like a very clear, distinct difference between these two. That turned out really great, Josh. Or Carlito. One thing I would say, Joshua, is that I would see if we could try to curve some of these lines. So right now, a lot of these lines, like, see how this line is nice and curved? What I would want to see is maybe a little bit more curving of some of these lines to help give us the shape of this arm. Because right now it's very flat, like all these square, angular marks. I mean, this is a weird painting to begin with. This Titian painting, it certainly looks like this fellow is wearing like 5 layers of jackets, you know. So he already kind of looks like very inflated, unusually large, and there's I don't want to get into all the technicalities, but it's possible that he used some sort of device to an optical device to trace the image onto the canvas, which causes some distortions. But you know, again, like we can see, everyone's done that, including myself. And Heidi. Heidi's maybe the one who's maybe de-emphasized that jacket the most, but even still, right? I love this a lot, Heidi. I really like how his face looks, the beard, the subtle, like his chin's kind of just barely coming through that beard, because the beard looks like it's fairly kind of thin hair. I like that. And then Eleanor's, very different. I think Eleanor, what we need is a little bit more darker colors on the face, and that could be done with just a glaze. So I don't know if you've been using a glazing fluid yet, and I can't remember just what other paintings, but using something like a satin glazing fluid, I think what you could do is just mix a little bit of this into a darker color. Maybe even like the same color you're using for the beard, and just have like 5-to-1 glazing fluid and color, and then just kind of coming in and getting a little bit of these areas like on the cheeks, right? Almost kind of like what we've done here with the ear, and that would, I think, help create a little bit more definition on the face. And we could even do that on this arm, is darkening in some places, because right now this almost looks like a pattern on the clothes as opposed to folds on the clothes. And again, I'm being nitpicky because you're doing a great job, so wouldn't it be awesome if we could do even better, right? Really exceptional, great work. Did I have anything to say here with Heidi? I don't think I would say anything. Like, I was so tempted with this painting to like trim this jacket down. It just looks a little bit bizarrely big. But that would be kind of changing the painting. But and both of these are by Eleanor. It's interesting seeing them. Is this just taken from a different angle? I'm not sure. But she says, I feel I need to lighten up the painting so it's not just dark brown for most of the canvas. It might not be the right colors. But I did the painting to get more practice with faces. Well, I would say the opposite. I would say the painting needs to get darker. I think the painting, that's what Titian did. Like, if you look at Heidi's version, I think is probably the closest version of the painting to the original Titian. And this is a feature of paintings of the era, right? Renaissance paintings, Baroque paintings. A lot of them are darker. They often feature more of what we call like a theatrical lighting. The chiaroscuro, which is the Italian term for this lighting, where maybe just part of the face is illuminated and the rest of the body disappears into the shadows. Obviously, the Rembrandt painting that we did, the self-portrait that he did, that we tried to reproduce, is the extreme version of that, right? Where almost the whole face just disappears into shadow, except a little bit of the cheek. But when we look at it, the eyes are kind of lurking in the shadow, and that's what makes that painting so enigmatic, right? So when you're saying you think this painting needs to be brighter and more lighter, I can understand people looking at the original and saying, wow, it's really dark. And so there's nothing wrong with lightening it up. But if you want to get closer to what a master like Titian, who is acknowledged by painters as being, certainly within the top 5 all-time greatest painter, from a technical perspective, then we would want the painter to get really much darker, like this gray going much darker, and that could be done with a glaze. The face certainly needs to get darker, because like the ear, I think you've nailed the colors on the ear, but the face just has a really pasty white yellow kind of quality. And I think if we were to go again, oh, does look like, so this one, so that's the original, and you've done a little bit more. I think it needs even more of that, right? So rather than lightening, we need to go darker, which might seem for you kind of like, oh, I don't know, I don't know if I can go darker. I feel like, which I think is the vast majority of people. Whenever I'm teaching people in person, I would say 9 out of 10 times I'm going around and telling people that needs to get darker, that needs to get darker, that needs to get darker, that needs to get darker. Everybody needs to get darker. And there might be one person who's already dark or needs to lighten it up a little bit. But generally, most people are afraid to push the contrasts. And I think by pushing the contrasts, you actually make your life easier. Because if everything is kind of light, then you only have a very small, narrow band of like, this is really bright, this is my highlight, and then this is my darkest dark. Well, everything has to fit in between here, and making variations of grays that are in, like, I mean, that is like the hardest thing to do. So if you have your highlight here and this is your darkest dark, that is really tricky, right? That's sort of one of the things that like Agnes Martin in her abstract paintings is doing, is like very minor differences between white. And she was ridiculed for it, even though I think she's great. Obviously, we did 2 paintings by her. But if instead you have your highlight here and your darkest dark is down here, well, then now you've actually made your life a lot easier, because you've got now all of these different layers, different variations to go through. So that would be my recommendation. Emerson says, hello, hi Emerson, how do we submit a painting? So you can join the Facebook group. There's a link in the description below to the Facebook group, and upload your versions of paintings we're doing in class. So everything you've seen so far, we have done paintings based on it, and you can join that group and you see there's links to every painting. And then you can also, like here's Heidi, a painting we'll talk about in a few moments. You can also upload paintings that you're working on your own, outside of class, right? And I'm always interested to see what people are doing on their own time. So let's move on to another, or to a different artist, Cornelius Krieghoff, sort of seen as one of Canada's greatest artists of all time. So this is his portrait of Jerry. This dog, Jerry. Oh, I love how you put the name tag on his collar. That's great, Eleanor. I love that kind of stuff. Okay, and here's Heidi's version, Paula's version, and Shelley's. Wow, you guys. Let's go back up here. Oh, these are great. So, let's start here with Eleanor's. First of all, I love, Eleanor, how you customize the collar. I like how you replace the dead rat or mouse with a bone, like a chew toy or something, and sort of maybe took away one of the less appealing parts of that painting, right? Which I thought, is... when we were making that painting, I suggested that might be something you could do, because some people might find that mouse to be a little bit off-putting, right? I included it because I also thought that was there was a level of authenticity, which I'm always trying to get with any of these episodes. But also I found it just very interesting to think of like how a dog has changed, over time. And like you see here, Paula, it looks like has replaced it with a fish. Is that just me, or does that look like a fish? And here's Shelly's. That's cool. So again, let's start here with Eleanor. I think you did a great job, Eleanor. I love the way that you've done the fur. It is tricky. Painting animals is not easy. And that's why some people, there's artists who've made entire careers out of doing just that, because learning how to do all of those little hairs and to pull it off properly is certainly an acquired skill for sure. And I wouldn't say that I'm very good at it either. I'm sure there's other people who've been doing it for decades who can do it much more efficiently and with greater fidelity than I can. But I think you've done a really great job. One thing I would say, I feel like this area is a little bit bright. This top right hand corner with the brick, I feel like is maybe too dominant. Like I kind of want it to be darkened down a little bit so that it's just not as attention grabbing. But you know, small little thing. What else could I say? That might be enough. Yeah, I think you've done a great job. Really good job. Although, you know, maybe it's again like the white of the eyes. Just being careful when we say like the white of someone's eyes, people often think like, oh, okay, just put some white there. But it's often white can often be way too strong a color choice to put in the eye, because again, it turns the eyes a little cartoony. So I think even if we just turn these a little bit more brown, that it would, I think, make this dog look a little bit more realistic, I suppose you could say. Wow, this is really good, Heidi. A lot more of a brownish, reddish brown quality. I'm not sure how much of that is the way that this has been photographed, or if it is like this in person. But I do think it worked really, really well. Like, you know, here we were talking about Eleanor and these bricks back here, darkening those down, and now it's not even something I particularly look at. It's just there, but my attention stays on Jerry the dog here. Really nice. I think this turned out really well, Heidi. Don't think I would say anything different. Paula's here. Is there any difference between... It's trimmed a little bit in the top and bottom, hey? One of the things here, Paula, is I think we're missing a little bit of the snout of the dog, and so you can see like the way that Heidi's painted it here, like this kind of, you know, little, like dogs kind of cry a little bit, right? Their eyes kind of water, and often it creates like a discoloration in their fur, which we can use as artists to help define different parts of a dog's face. And I think that might be helpful to apply a little bit of that. Now, this is sort of the exact opposite of what we were talking about with Eleanor here, and she's got the whites of the eyes being maybe a bit too prominent. Here, we actually need a little bit of white, or a lighter gray in here, lighter brown, to give a little bit more life back to this dog. Right now, the dog's eyes being black make them look empty and potentially even like a little bit haunting, right? So it kind of takes some of the life out of that character, out of the dog. So I think a little bit of white in the corner of these eyes, and again, maybe not white right out of the tube, but like maybe, you know, if we were to look at a color like this down here, right? And if we put a little bit of that in here, or you were to take, you know, that color and put it in there, that I think would make a huge difference. And maybe even just bringing the edge of this mouth around. because that nose, something about this nose is confusing me. I think it's because that line is making the dog's nose sort of turning out more towards me. Where is this? So there's a confusion as to which way this nose is pointed. So I feel like this line should, maybe it's just the nose. It's, well, I think it's that. We want to have another line here, tear duct, and a bit of, I mean, again, small nitpicky details. And the fur is mostly really well done. But I think we could have a little bit more very thin lines in there. Kind of like what Shelly's done here. This is great, Shelly. Really nice. I like this shadow back there. See, again, like Eleanor, if we had even just a shadow above and leaving a little bit of light here, that would work. A really good job here. One thing, Shelly, is, and this could be the way that this is photographed or the paper being slightly warped, but I get the, like, it looks like this line, like if I see how this line kind of diverges, like if we just think of this as going straight across, that line kind of comes up higher and higher, and this one kind of goes down, this one comes up. So we've got a bunch of lines that are kind of moving up and down. Same thing. Oops. Same thing down here. Like this one starts here and then it moves up. Maybe it's just, maybe it was photographed on an angle and it is straight, but it is, maybe it's just my own OCD or something that looks at that and it was like, oh, I want those lines to be straighter. So I always think, like, if you're going to, if you have a line that's kind of crooked, is to make it really obvious that it's crooked. And so, and use what is called like a Dutch angle, which is to, and you see this in cinema all the time, like filmmakers will tilt the camera to give like a sense of like, whoa, this is, everything is like off kilter, but the camera is very deliberately off and tilting it this way. But when it's just a little bit off, the viewer goes like, oh, something, what is wrong with that filmmaker? Everything's just slightly crooked. You know, the same thing in your house. If the painting is just a little bit off, it can be really annoying. But if you were to hang it on its, like as if it was like a diamond shape on the wall, somebody might come into your house and they're probably not going to go like, wow, that painting's really crooked. They might be like, huh, that's a really interesting way of hanging that painting, right? So that's a little minor difference here. Shelly says, I think I do that with all my pictures. One thing that can be helpful is, you know, if you're painting, let's say, on a table, and I think I did this the other day with, I can't remember which painting, but I even took some tape and put some tape on either side so that I could see those lines going through. So if I was painting a line, you know, if I put tape on either side, then if that line starts going up and it deviates from the line on the other side, I'm like, oh, I gotta bring it back down. I mean, just a minor thing, but just something to think about, you know, as we go forward here. How are we doing for time? I was hoping to get, well, let's take a look at work that you guys have been doing, and then we'll, if there's time, we'll continue talking about some of the other artists. I was hoping to get through a few more, but man, this Michael guy's got he's always just got to blab on and on endlessly about things, doesn't he? So, So I've got 33 paintings that you guys have been working on your own, and so we'll go through these now. Just thinking, where should we begin? Okay, how about we'll just start here with Dolores, since it's right up here on the screen. So Dolores said, I needed my friend needed a sketch of someone shoveling snow, so I did this one. That's a funny, I don't know, when I remember reading it, I was like, that's funny. Someone is like, oh no, I need a painting of someone shoveling snow immediately. It's urgent, right? And then you came to the rescue. Like there's like fire department, ambulance, and emergency sketch artist, right? Who shows up on the scene. It's a matter of life and death for the sketch to be created, right? But this turned out really great. And all kidding aside, Dolores, I think it's a really nice drawing of someone shoveling snow. And it's a very simple drawing. It's done with watercolor, obviously. You probably painted the pen, or you did pen lines. I don't know if there's any pencil. Maybe you just drew and then painted directly over top of it. And there's a really nice economy of marks here where you're very efficient with the lines that need to be done. Like some people would just obsess over the face and where the nose goes and all the wrinkles here, and you've just like done the bare minimum, and I mean that in the best of ways. You're really like, okay, this is what needs to be done to make this painting work. No more, no less. Everything that is needed is there. Other people would have spent a bunch of time doing the house across the street and the car and the driveway, all these other things. You've painted only what's necessary here, and I think that's great. I really like that. And you've let some of the watercolor do the folds on the body too, which is great. Really nice job. Let's look at a couple of plein air paintings that you did, and I think you finished these at home. So this one, Windy Lake, another plein air oil painting from the fall. And I think last episode we saw some photos that you included where we saw your easel outside while you were painting. And you did a great job of taking advantage of relatively good weather while we had it here in Canada. You know, we only have a couple of weeks a year where there's no snow. So you gotta reap while the what is the saying? Reap while the sun is out, or the grass is, or the whatever, you know what I'm talking about. So reap and sow. Yeah, I like this a lot. Really nice sense of depth. I really like the composition too. I really like how you've got this little bit of a pathway, very short pathway leading us right up to the water's edge. You know, it has a lot of like a bit of a group of seven quality, where, you know, because they would do this kind of thing all the time, but you've got your own technique and style that's emerging from as the more and more and more you paint, which is a great lesson for everyone else who's watching, who's maybe not quite as far down their creative journey road as you are, Dolores. And like, man, these are getting really good, like especially when we look at the next one here. Is there anything I can say? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. The only thing that I might say is I think we've got the same sort of warm greens on the far shore as we have over here in the foreground and the bottom. And I love how all of this looks, but since it's almost like there's some darker greens here, and I think we want to have a few of those darker greens down here. It's a very, very minor thing. I don't know if you would need to do any changes at all, but if you were looking, if you felt like you needed something, that would be my thing, is like a couple of warm greens that are darker, not gray, but with either black or with a really, really dark mixture, again, like the kind that I always make. And potentially like a cooler green mixed into here with gray in there. I mean, again, I don't think you need to do anything, but if you were saying I really need something there, that's what I would say. Dolores says, this sketch was for a poster finding volunteers for shoveling walks. Okay. That's great. I love that. That's awesome. Well, in which case it probably was, you know, and all kidding aside, a bit of an emergency. There's places, as being here in Canada, when it snows and it continues snowing, and there's definitely some people who are trapped in their houses because they can't get out because there's so much snow. And so having people help their next door neighbors shoveling snow is literally a way to help people survive, right? So awesome. Great. That's a wonderful use of your talent. Thank you for doing that, Dolores. I love this painting. This is awesome. You called this Two Fences. This is a Paint Air painting I started at Flying U Ranch, and I'm happy with it now, so you signed it. That's awesome. This is a really, really nice painting. I think this might be my favorite painting that you've done so far. It's certainly worthy of your signature for sure. Where did that go? Beautiful uses of like painting in these trees and the shadows. A bit of cooler greens back here. The sky, right? Just like the water. Like this is a great painting. Really nice. I almost feel there's something in this area that's a little flat. I'm not sure. Maybe it's that there's some gray in these leaves. Gray, which I think would be more appropriate for back here. Again, like we have this darker color here, and that darker color wants to come forward, right? Where we've got a darker color, but it's mixed in with gray, and it is, you know, maybe counteracting a little bit of the composition. And you know, obviously you don't have to do anything, but I do think just be mindful of if we're adding gray and white into the foreground elements, it's going to push them back a little bit. Okay, let's look at Gail here. She was in Arizona, so painted a blue agave plant. I like that. It feels like very Warhol-esque. Like the juxtaposition of these blues and reds is something that he did all the time in his prints. And it gives it that, because it's for the eye, causes this kind of optical illusion where it's hard for our eyes to deal with those opposing colors, so the painting kind of vibrates. So I think that's really cool. I think it turned out really great. This painting here is after Albert Copper's Gaucho Serenade. I started last April, but didn't finish it, and just finally finished. I think a great painting. I love this. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the original painting or the artist either, but so I don't know if that's how he did the background or if you've made a change there. But I do think this painting turned out really great. Well, let's just come back here. Little thing that I think is slightly problematic though is if we look and this is, again, I'm just such a nitpicker, but okay, so we have this guitar. So here's the shape of the guitar. This, if we follow the shape back here, and I think that makes the most sense for his body. So if this is the frets on the guitar should also be going kind of parallel to this line. So right now they're slant, or let's see, they're slanted when I think they should be a little bit more vertical. And same sort of thing here. Otherwise, this whole guitar body should rotate and also be parallel to these diagonal lines. Does that make sense? So then also this line here, instead of tilted, should be more, maybe not completely straight, but should be on a bit of a diagonal. And then of course, I think what really caught my eye, honestly, is just this line right here at the edge of the head of the guitar here. And that being not only, like, it is closer to what this looks like, but you could see, so it's just a question of like, which way do you want those lines. Some lines have to be changed in order to make it quote unquote a little bit better, but it's a minor thing. But you know, you could, one way to sort of get around it would be just to de-emphasize maybe this line. Yeah, it's a you know, again, I fiddle with these kind of things all the time, and I noticed, well, when we talk next time about the Challenger painting I did, I noticed afterwards that I totally goofed on something similar like that I didn't even notice until afterwards, and I'm sitting on the couch looking at it, and then it's like, ah, how did I, right? And so when we get to that painting, I'll point it out to you and show it to you, because hey, I make mistakes just like anybody else, right? I'm not perfect, right? So let's move on here to Heidi's painting. And this is awesome, Heidi. We just saw this on the Facebook page. I think you just uploaded it over the past 24 hours or so. Really cool. I really love these flowers. I love the tree in particular. And this is a great example of this darker color. It's not black. It's not even the darkest brown that we can get, but it is a darker brown than really anything else in the painting. And it's even darker than this container ship off in the distance. And because of that, it sits closest to us. It really comes close to the front plane of the painting. So much so that it makes me want a little bit of that brown somewhere down here. Now, you could say, like, well, there's just leaves down here, but it makes me wonder if compositionally something could go here, like another, and I'm not saying you should change anything, but that would just be, I don't know, what could you could move or put another bush here, or have some larger leaves on the ground that are darker and more defined, because a lot of this is just sort of these abstract little dashes. So a few more carefully painted, darker orangey leaves, maybe. I'm just here. I am just nitpicking. But the background, beautiful. I love how it just sort of fades right out, right? Using the kind of that dry brush technique that you've really developed really, really well. And the leaves on these trees, wow, that is so exciting. Really beautiful. Wow, does that keep changing? Really beautiful attention to detail. I like that a lot. Really, really nice. One of your best paintings for sure. And you've done a lot of really nice paintings lately of the English Bay. English Bay is a, you know, a water body of water adjacent to the ocean, or here in Vancouver. So you've been painting a lot of those, and they're turning out so good. Oh my goodness! And then yeah, well, and here we see some of them right here. We've looked at all of these in these past few episodes that we've done, of these feedback episodes. And what I like here is that you've said you got about a dozen gallery art frames and experimented with different combinations with or without glass, and you prefer them without the glass, I think you said, right? I prefer the texture without the glass. These look awesome. I'm curious where these frames came from. Are these like IKEA frames? Because they look kind of like the IKEA frames. Though, just as a small thing, I see these like J hooks in the wall. That's a little bit of a precarious way to hang these frames. I don't know what kind of backing is on the back of these frames. If they have just like a little plate with little teeth in it that can sit on a nail, in which case I would just put a nail into the wall and hang that little plate that's on the back of the frame. I think actually we've got, yeah, okay, so this is the back of one of the frames. So what I would do is just put a nail into the wall and then hang that onto the nail rather than using these J hooks, because these J hooks are intended for a wire that you would put on the back of your frame. So you may or may not have ever seen that, but I used to build frames, and I used to do this all the time, is you would string a wire across the frame. This image is upside down here, so let's turn it. So you would string a wire that's kind of loose enough that it can you can bow, and then you'd put the J hook, and then that wire would hang on the J hook. So I mean, you can certainly do whatever you want. The thing is that having that thing sticking up above the frame is a little bit, you know, it is not visually pleasing, I guess, and potentially is also compromising the safety of those frames. They could bop off them a little bit. I mean, the whole thing on frames is precarious to begin with. The best thing you can do is string a wire, or there's I know I have tons of hanging stuff behind me, but I don't know if I'm gonna dig around for them. But you can screw those in, and I could make a video, but I'm sure there are literally thousands of videos that show how to install a wire on the back of a frame. Heidi says, thank you for your suggestions. I will factor them. And it says, they're not IKEA. I use IKEA frames all the time. When I exhibit work, one of the first things I often do is get off the airplane and go right to the IKEA, buy a bunch of frames that fit the artwork that I'm sending, because it's usually way cheap. I used to build frames. I used to own my own company. That's how I lived in Los Angeles for 12 years, building museum quality frames for people. And I've got frames that are on artworks that are in the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in Los Angeles. But I also charged people like a couple $1,000s for those frames, and they're beautiful. They'll live forever, and they're heavy and super durable. But so I can build my own frames, but I use IKEA frames all the time for my work because they're cheap, they're easy, they look, for the most part, just like a really, really expensive frame. So often these days I make work that I know is going to fit inside of a typical IKEA frame, and then I just go and buy them. And it's also easy for collectors, particularly people who are kind of at the beginning of collecting art. It's very easy if I make artwork that is like a standard size, it makes it a lot easier for them to go and get that artwork framed, right? Anyway, let's move on here. Here's a few more of your pictures in these frames. I agree that without the glass is probably the better option, especially because if you get a cheaper frame, the glass is usually very highly reflective, and it can be it can really take away from a painting. It's usually not as annoying if you've got a print or a drawing underneath, but you can get plexiglass that is non-reflective. It costs like 5 times as much as regular plexiglass, and I used to buy that stuff all the time, and I can't remember what the name of it is. It had anyway, you can also get non-reflective glass. Either non-reflective plexi and non-reflective glass are very expensive because of that non-reflective property. It does make a huge difference. If you've ever gone to a museum and you've looked at a painting and you can't even tell, sometimes it takes, you're like, is there glass behind that? And you look at, and then you can finally see a little bit of a reflection. That's a sign of like a really, really good framing job, and very expensive, and often it's done to help protect the surface, right? Because people want to touch paintings all the time. Let's look here at Joshua's work here. Joshua did this Frida Kahlo painting that we did about a year ago, right? We did this painting in our Intro to Painting class. So it's cool to see Joshua going back and doing some of those older episodes. Do I have anything I want to add to that? I don't know. I think it's turned out pretty good. I think we need a little bit of another color in the shadows. So, what I often will say, like when we're doing a still life, is to paint the opposite color in the shadows and as reflection. So if we've got this orange, painting like a green or a blue shadow, and then a little bit of that green as reflected light. So, and the opposite would be, let's say, this green here on this, I don't know what this is, an apple or a pear, and then painting instead like a bit of a reddish quality down here, purpley or something that is contrasts with the original, and that gives your shadows a lot of light. Eleanor said, thank you for your help. I needed some guidance on these paintings. I really appreciate the feedback. My pleasure. Heidi says, the J-hooks were there before, but I can change them. Yes, definitely. Again, you don't have to. That's just my, because one of the things I teach at school is I teach my students how to hang artwork, right? So, that's just my teacher hat coming on. It's hard for me to go about life without my teacher hat on. If you're ever in a room full of teachers, it is like the most annoying. Like, I was the president of our faculty association, and like being around a room full of teachers is like exhausting because everyone is trying to tell everyone else what to do all the time. Anyway, so let's move on here. Joshua, I think this is the statue that you were mentioning that you wanted some feedback on. I think you did a great job here. I think you've done a really nice job throughout most of the painting. I think there's a few things that seem a little bit off for me, one of which is the belly button and the other is the nose. So if we look at this, I'm trying to decide something like this belly button. This is an original, like a Greek sculpture, a fragment of a Greek that is obviously, there's the arms have been broken off, and as was, typical, something that's a miracle that these things survived 3,000 years to begin with, let alone being broken. But I think there's this belly button is probably should be maybe over here. Now this figure is kind of contorted anyway, so maybe the figure is turning. There's something, maybe it is in the right place, but then we would expect maybe, this is, kind of those, that V kind of chiseled part of the abs and the pelvis. I think that line, there would be a line right here, and again, you could refer to the original, but I feel like there's something missing, and probably, the six-pack here needs a little bit of definition. And here's our rib cage, and you can see this rib is going here. It should carry around on this side, whereas right now it goes here, and then the other side of the rib cage goes up. So I think we want this to be an arc that goes all the way around, and it's a clean, seamless arc. And I don't know about that line here. Again, I can't remember the original sculpture this is based upon. And then with the nose is slightly crooked because I'm not sure how this, like, the nose is sort of pointing, like, okay, so look at the side of the face here. The sides of the face, this angle is tapering this way, this angle's tapering this way, and then the nose is going in a more upwards diagonal, right? Whereas it should also be going parallel, or kind of converge. See, these two sides of the face are going to converge way off the edge of the painting, right? So if we sort of take this area, but we just continue going in that direction, right? Does that make sense? That we have the two sides of the face are like this, but the nose inside is currently pointing upwards, whereas it should be parallel to the inside of the face. So, and then this top part, so this is an eyebrow. There's a bunch of little small things. Like, I would look at the original, and again, you wanted a bunch of feedback from me about this, so I'm trying my best to try to give you as much practical advice as possible. So there's just a few very minor things, but ultimately everything's working really well. I mean, do I even think you need to do anything to this painting? Not really. I mean, I think you should be pretty happy with this painting, but if you really feel like you need to fix it, or you were looking at it and there's things that are driving you crazy, things that I think there's with the nose and something like with this rib cage, yeah, because yeah, okay, so if we're looking at, like, look at how the nipples on the chest are. Like, first of all, I think maybe this part of the chest is bigger than this one, and this is closer to us, so it should be larger, right? Or it should come out a little bit further here, or this should be smaller. So there's something with this chest muscle right here that needs to be expanded, perhaps, and this one may be reduced. And I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, this is twisted, so maybe that's why this is down. But then wouldn't this also come down and then this come up? So, and I'm sure I could just Google this image and we could find it, and then we could compare it to it. But I think that's something that you could do, is to take a look at where some of the discrepancies are between yours and the original. And I think because they exist, and I just don't know the original sculpture well enough. So anyway, let's move on. And come on. It's a good. It reminds me here at this moment. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And there's a bunch of people watching right now. If everyone just liked the video, that would be super helpful, right? Also, if you found anything that I've been saying to be instructive or useful, helpful, please consider leaving a donation. There's the super chat function. You could contribute directly through YouTube right now. Or you could send a PayPal, e-transfer, or check by using the links in the description below. You could send an e-transfer by contacting me through my website or through the Facebook group, right? All of your donations are super appreciated. That's how this continues to run, right? Let's, here's your Picasso. I think that turned out pretty well. I can't remember the original, so it's hard for me to kind of give advice based on that. Let's look at Lori's here. Lori said, I want to define the eyes more, but I still want them to feel like they are looking at you no matter which side of the painting. It's an interesting question. How do I get the... I was thinking about this earlier when I read, it's like, how do you get the eyes to follow you around the room? I've never thought about it until I was reading that comment. I don't know how some paintings do. I don't know if it's worth getting into the technical thing, but I think part of it is a very subtle use of almost sort of blurring the edge in the eye as to what the white of the eye is and where the iris is, and then where the other side of the white of the eye is, so that it's kind of ambiguous as to where the actual center of the eye is. And that would be done almost like sort of like blending it out, so it sort of is kind of lighter and then darker and then lighter again, without a solid shape. So if you were to try to do this in this painting, what that would mean, and this is just my hypothesis, well, you know what I'm talking about. What I think you would want to do would be to make this, you would want to get rid of this solid green line, a little bit more of like what you've done here, but potentially moving this eye more central and having that happen on both sides, so that what that would do would be that indistinctness of where the iris is would give it the impression of us being able to see it from different angles and feel like it's looking towards us. Now, I don't know if this is the solution. That's just the first thing that, if I was trying to get that effect, that would be what I would imagine you would want to do. If you want to have the illusion that Van Gogh is following you around the room when you look at the painting, we'd want to make the irises less distinct. Having said that, I don't know if you really want to do that, if that's such a good idea. I think I mean, I love the way that you've done this eye, and I think you could bring a little bit of that over onto this eye, and that might be the first step. It's just doing that and just seeing, does it follow me around a little bit more? Because I think, just like we've talked about it with a few different people, when we have this like one big flat shape, whether it's white or in this case blue, it does make it look a little bit more cartoony. I mean, on the other side of things, I think you've done a great job on this painting. And we did a whole feedback episode where we talked about these Van Goghs, and this would definitely be one of the best ones that was done in the class. So in terms of the rest of the painting, I think it turned out really, really well. Oh, I see Paula left a contribution through the super chat. Thank you so much, Paula. I really appreciate that. That's super cool. Thank you. Awesome. And thank you to all of the rest of you who are contributing. Again, I'm probably after the end of the episode, I'll see a few more donations via e-transfer, etc., and PayPal, and I'm just blown away by your support and encouragement. Here is Leslie's painting. So we got a few here from Leslie, who's, I think, just joined the community about a month ago, and has been going through some of the earlier paintings from the Intro to Painting course that we did. And so it's, again, I think it's really fun for those of you that have been painting with me for over a year now to as we look at some of these, to be like, oh, I remember when we did that Monet painting. So we did this, I think was this our New Year's Eve painting? Somewhere we did this last year around New Year's or Christmas, or after Christmas, somewhere around there, because I liked the idea of the sunset or sunrise as, or maybe we did this January 1st. Not that it matters to anybody watching, but just thinking about, this is, 11 months ago we did this painting. Really cool. Really great job, Leslie. And we're so excited to have you part of the community as well. I don't think I have anything to add to it. I mean, I guess I would say that maybe these, I think these were, we were trying to decide, are they smokestacks or are they masts of ships in the harbor? I would say, it might be, if they were a little bit less defined, maybe a little bit more gray, because right now they're kind of dark, and they do compete with, these figures in the front sit close to the front because they're darker. But I think you did a really great job with this, with the sun as well, because that is a big part of that painting. And this here, this is the Al Loving cube, and I'm just, how did you do these lines? Is that a Sharpie or an acrylic paint pen? I'm not sure how you did that. But it looks great. I think, it's learning how to mix some of these colors and nuances like that is very tricky. I think you did a great job there. Here's the Van Gogh Starry Night. Is that a Sharpie? If it is a Sharpie, or maybe it's an acrylic paint pen. I'm always discouraging people from using Sharpies with their paintings. It works, but you might use it and then 5 months later realize that Sharpie has changed color. It's now purple and faded and maybe even bled a little bit into other colors. I think you did a great job here, Leslie. There's definitely a few things missing, like in the hillside and down here. I think the city is a little bit more blue, a warmer blue. But for someone who's just beginning, who's just joined us recently, I think it's really exciting to think about where you're going to go if this is what you're making right now. So I couldn't be more pleased. On a similar painting is the KM Graham's Arctic Nights. This was the final painting we made for our Intro to Acrylic series, so it's kind of fun to I just going back and looking at these thinking like, wow, I have so many memories. Who would have thought this is where we would be today a year later? That one turned out really nice. I like that a lot. I love the speed of these brush strokes. That's really exciting to think about, like your confidence building up. Here's your Vermeer. I think this turned out really well. I think if you can get a little bit of like some glazing fluid, right? Because I use this a lot for especially doing portraits. And if we got a little bit of that glazing fluid, we could get a little bit more nuance into the face. Like, I imagine this could be a little frustrating if you don't have glazing fluid to get those subtle like skin tones and shadows, like even on the body here. So, but I mean, again, it's still a huge achievement to get where you're at. Here's another one here that you did, a Frida Kahlo's Tapestry. I'm not familiar with this image. I guess this is a Frida Kahlo painting that you did. It looks cool. I guess this is how it did. Is this how it looked with kind of this kind of watercolor like background and these empty shapes? I can't really comment on it because I'm not too familiar with this image. It does look cool. It is kind of interesting the way it's got all this extra space on the side. We'll have to try and see if I can find that one. This looks like a Gauguin or Van Gogh paint, or Vincent. This is Van Gogh. Oh, let's come back here. Good job. Looks like you're drawing these by eye, and you're doing a really, like, drawing portraits by eye is really tricky, as Paula can, I'm sure, attest to, who's coming up next here. Yeah, the only thing I would say is it'd be nice to see a little bit more background. Like, what is the background in this painting? I can't remember. I think it's like a lime green or something, if I recall. So it might be fun to try to mix those colors and have them accompanying there. And then here is Van Gogh taking a self-portrait while wearing a mask. To date with a mobile phone and wearing a face mask. I think that's quite funny, Leslie. That is pretty cool. The one thing I would say, so we were talking earlier about having the eyes follow you around the room. Here the eyes are pointing in different directions, which is maybe causes a bit of that effect of the eyes sort of are seem to be looking at you no matter where you're looking at. Where you put your eyes is always a little bit tricky. That's something that I could even do a whole video on, as to like, where do you put the eyes. I think the actual oops, if I was to do this painting, I would paint one of these eyes out, and if I was to move this one, I think the center of this eye would be right about here. So you could see it's, I don't know how big this painting is, but an inch or so over. Essentially, look at how much white is on. So on this eye, look how there's very little white of the eye right here. So we'd want to have very little of the white right here. Maybe a little bit more, but this is way too much, right? So the other way you could look at it is like, look at how much space is here, and then look how much space is there. So the eye just needs to be shifted over a bit. The other thing, or I guess if he's, okay, so if I could shift the eye over here, and that would make him look like he is, yeah, if we want to have him kind of looking, that's kind of, I can't see the screen, so I'm not sure how well I'm doing it, but let's see. See how kind of like the white of my eyes. Now now I'm thinking like, oh, he's holding his phone taking a selfie. So if he's sort of looking away but looking at the phone, like that would be kind of the look, right? And so you could see maybe this eye here is in the right position, but that would mean this one would probably have to come over here. Does that make sense? And the other thing too is these eyes are open maybe a little bit wider than they should be. Almost never, unless you're like, look how hard, like I have to open my eyes as wide as possible for me to have for you to see all the way around my iris, right? For there to be white around my iris, my eyes have to be uncomfortably wide open. So most of the time, like if you just look at my eyes right now, the top and the bottom of the circle of my iris are being clipped by my eyelids, right? So when we have eyes like this, first of all, it makes somebody look like they're really surprised. But then we look at the eyebrows, and the eyebrows are relaxed. So it's just sort of making a decision as to if we want him to look really surprised. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, people, especially when they're doing selfies, make all sorts of faces. So we might want those eyebrows really high, like when I'm doing that, right? Like, and then we would maybe move this eye over, and that would be fine. Or we would, you know, bring those eyelids down a little bit. And yeah, so just anyway, I don't mean to be overly critical, but I think that's something that probably most people who are painting faces deal with all the time, is like, where exactly you can get one eye in, but getting the other eye in the right place so they both look like they're looking in the same direction is tricky. This is when I'm drawing a graphic novel right now, a comic book, and I tell you, there's a lot. It's probably the thing I spend the most amount of time is trying to make sure the eyes are lined up so they're looking in the right direction. So it takes some time to get it all working here. Maybe I'll just point this out right here. I saw this, Sandra uploaded this, and if you're watching, Sandra, could you remind me what this image is from? Because I didn't get a chance. I was pulling all these images off, and I was like, what are these from? It's like from obviously like a Zoom call or something. And then you decided to make this painting based on it. So I'm going to talk about Paula's work, but if you're watching, Sandra, let me know in the chat what exactly we're looking at there. So Paula, here, these birds. I love these, Paula. These are so cool. I love these studies of different birds. I'm not a birder myself. I don't know really anything about birds. Just the other day, we have a clear bird's nest mounted to our living room window, so we can sit on the couch and with our daughter and look at the birds coming in, and we can see them, and they can also see us. So if we do too much movement, they get scared and fly away. But usually it's a fairly small birdhouse, so only small birds come. But I don't know, it was a kingfisher or some big bird landed on there and was like eating, and I took a photo of it before it flew away. But I was just sitting, my daughter wasn't paying attention, and I was like, wow, that is a big bird. I was surprised that the suction cups didn't fall off and it took the whole bird's nest with it. But anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is I don't know anything about any birds or different personalities of birds and their plumage, etc. But I do really appreciate all of these different images. I also like you added a little texture into the sky and different colors. You know, it makes me think about how they could be really cool, like Christmas ornaments or coasters. You know, if you took these and you painted them, or you could cut them out and you could glue them onto wood and then coat them with a lot of like an acrylic sealant, the kind of thing that you would paint on like a deck for winter so that it doesn't weather, and they would be sealed in, and then you could put a cup or mug on them, or you could hang them on your Christmas tree. These could look really cool, like especially if you did one on both sides. I don't know, maybe that's just the business part of me thinking of how you could take advantage of these cool artworks you're making. You could also make prints of these, or turn them into buttons, or they could just stay like they are now. But I think they turned out really cool, and I love all these drawings down here. Really cool job. Oh wow, lots of comments here. Lolly says, I really like that modern version of Van Gogh. Tomcat55 says, maybe he's cockeyed. Lolly says, people tuning in now, seeing Michael will wonder what is happening. And Tomcat says, I Wonder why. Oh my goodness. That's my kind of humor right there. I appreciate it. And Lolly says, oh man, those birds are impressive. I love those birds. They would be beautiful framed and displayed, Paula. Yeah, I agree 100%. Good comment. So again, I'm not sure what these are, Sandra. I think it's really cool. Like this, obviously some sort of like probably a video game or anime, comic book character that you've painted here. And yeah, I'm not sure. But it's cool. I love that you took it from the web and then you're transforming it back into an actual thing in the real world. So here's Sharon's painting, and then so we looked at this last time, and then she posted just the other day what she said completed version. Now this one looks much darker. I don't know if it's actually that dark. So let's just take a moment and see if we can brighten it up and maybe get closer to what the original looked like. So if that's one. So differences that I see in the completed one is you've outlined this with a darker color, maybe added a little bit of tinted peachy color in here. So maybe this bush you've brightened up a little more red. And maybe you've added a bit of lightness on this tree, I think. Oh, maybe you've also done a little bit of lighter. You know, I think when we looked at this episode last time, I think I said I really liked it. So I don't know if all those changes were necessary. I mean, I think this turned out pretty good. How about what we see now? Again, now I have changed the colors from the original. Again, that was what was on the Facebook, so I can only speculate if this is closer to what it actually looked like. And you did something down here too in these bushes. I think they're, I don't know. I mean, I can see the logic behind all of those choices. I would have been fine leaving this painting as it is. I think maybe this red, I don't know if it needed to be all such bright red. You know, if we look at the original, it's kind of muted, and I think maybe just a little, like I would have done like literally 5 or 6 little dabs of bright red as opposed to like really brightening it up. I think it's almost too much, because there needs to be some shadow on there somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I think it is a little bit better, but I also think this was pretty good to begin with. So, you know, minor things. Let's continue on here. Here's Shelley's version of the Van Gogh that we did. We've only got a few more images left, and I think, how are we doing with time? I think we'll end off soon here. Oops. So Shelley here, this you know, when we were talking right at the beginning of today's episode, I think it was Lori's version of the Van Gogh, and I made, you know, I sort of talked a little bit about how I would approach, or how she approached that painting and why I thought it worked out really well. And I think some of those comments could be applied here. Like, it almost makes me think of doing some of the opposite and bringing a bit of cool yellow back into here, and then maybe warming up some of that other areas, and also having some of this warm yellow spill out onto the cobblestones. And we've got a bunch of paint here with water in it, right? Again, if there's anything you learn from me, when we're painting with acrylic paint, you really don't want to use water at all. Like, water should not be a part of your acrylic painting vocabulary, except maybe as a initial wash. And I know there's many of you who continue to use water and like, whatever, I'm not gonna, that's what he says. You don't have to listen to me, but it's just, it really is not using acrylics properly, or it's not using them like there's, if you want a little bit more of a fluid quality with acrylics, first of all, you could use fluid acrylics, which are already more like an ink-like mixture. They come pre-liquefied, and they maintain their dark, solid texture, and yet they're very easy to paint and do outlines with. So I would strongly consider those of you who are constantly adding water to your acrylic to stop using water in your acrylic and to look at like fluid acrylic or ink-based or acrylic-based inks, or maybe soft body acrylics, because usually what I'm using is heavy body acrylic. That's what I used to do all the paintings we've been doing, and it's thicker paint, right? So the first thing would be use fluid acrylics or acrylic inks, or to use things like glazing fluid or matte medium and mix those in, and you're going to get a little bit of a thinner paint, which you can use to have a bit more of a flowy sort of texture when you're painting. Again, it's just one of those things that I see over and over again, and it's I have to think it must be a little bit frustrating painting with water, and you're probably just not like, why am I just not getting the effect that Michael gets? Well, yeah, he's using this too, but this is like, what, I don't know, how much is $15, $20, which in this, I've used 2 of these over 150 paintings, right? So it's not like, and if you're going to spend $100 on paints, another $15 is not that much more, and it would be a great investment, I think. Anyway, just to get back to the rest of the painting, what I do really like is I like how we have the brightness of the square, and then how in behind here everything sort of gets very dark. Like, it feels like this is one of those streets where there's no street lamps, and it just gets really dark back there. I think that's turned out really well. These buildings with this kind of a muted green are really nice. I guess what I would say, and what Van Gogh did, is he's got like these almost the same warm blue that you've got on the side window here. He's got a bunch of that on the ground here, and he's also got some greens and some purples in here. So there's a lot. This is much more muted and more pastel than I think it needs to be. And because it's pasteled and muted, it's, rather than sitting right on the front and the bottom front, which should be the closest thing to us, it's moving further back, and it's kind of flattening that picture. So that picture, instead of it being more like coming out at us, it's tilting back up, if that makes any sense. Here's another painting by Shelley. This is the 90th anniversary of this tree that has been installed in the middle of the road, if I recall, in the town where she lives. I love this painting, and I really like the starbursts that you've got coming from the street lamps, which is, if you've taken my photography class here on YouTube, which is free, you could learn how to take photographs just like this. The one thing I would say is I would again use some glazing fluid, and I would tease these lines out even further with very thin acrylic, and you could get it be even more radiant, because right now they almost look like a tinsel ball or something, right? They look less like light that's radiating out and a solid object with spikes coming out of it, you know, like the top of a Christmas tree or something. So I think they are supposed to be light. They look like they're street lamps. So I think we want that light. It's fine for them to be really intense and hot in the middle, but as those beams come out, we want them to dissipate and sort of disappear into the sky. So that would be what I would suggest, is taking a little bit of glazing fluid and just extending them out a little bit more so that they're not so solid of shapes. Otherwise, I love the way you painted the snowbanks on the side. I love how they kind of, you know, these sort of dirty patches where cars are pulling up into there. I think that's like incredibly well done. And the streets, I love the use of this purples and blues in there. Really nice attention to detail. And even, like, you know, when we go back here, these lights, I love how you've got these kind of halo effects around them, and then the light right in the center. That is really nice. That turned out really, really cool. So ultimately, I think this, you know, I think this is like one of your best paintings. There's a lot of really, really nice things going on in here, and, you know, just compositionally, it's great. Like, I like how on the sides, the buildings, they're, you know, the side of these buildings are almost invisible. Like, they're there, but they're not too bright. So that is really kind of nice. So you kind of, a little bit like the way you did the Van Gogh, right, where these buildings sort of just disappear down the alleyway. Oh, Shelly says, I was able to get some glazing fluid this weekend. Okay, that's super exciting. Cool. Great job. Really, really, yeah, very, very exciting. And I think, how about we'll kind of wind up here, because here's Charmai's paintings that she had at her dentist's office, right? If you recall, these are the paintings we made when we painted recreations of Qi Bai Qi, the master Chinese artist from the turn of the last century. So she made, and then so we have the Lin Fimian and the Wu Guangzhang paintings on the side. So 3 of the best Chinese artists of all time, all on one wall together. I think that's awesome. And these were at, I guess these were at your dentist's office, and you've brought them home, and at your dentist's office you swapped them out with these Matthew Wong paintings that you did, which is so cool. I love that. Wow, your dentist is lucky to have you providing paintings for them like this. They must be so excited whenever you come around. Like, you should, I mean, no joke, consider asking them if you can get your dental work at a discount or for free by providing them this work like this. I've certainly done things like that. There's a lot of artists that I know who trade artwork or loan artwork to people in exchange for services. Most famously, the Chelsea Hotel in New York City, in Chelsea. I actually lived right across the street from the Chelsea Hotel for a while when I was an art student at the Cooper Union in New York City, where I went for part of my undergraduate degree. But famously, the Chelsea Hotel, artists would trade or give artworks to the owner in exchange for to be able to stay there. The Chelsea Hotel was not really a hotel, but more like of a residence hotel, right, where people might live for like a year or 5 months at a time. Anyway, the Chelsea Hotel amassed this massive collection of like really important, like something like $400 million worth of work. So they were pretty happy to, they're like, at the time, some of those artists weren't very well known, but, you know, anyway, I think it's so cool that you're putting these artworks that you're making up in, not just on your own wall, like here's your wall in your apartment, but that they're also going out onto other people's walls. And we're going to look, there's already been some other photos posted by some of you who've been giving gifts of your artwork to people, but we'll look at that next time because they're kind of also associated with artworks that we haven't looked at yet. So I think, you know, next time, come on. We still got lots of stuff to do to catch up to where we were, but, you know, we got all the way to... next time we'll start with Grandma Moses, and we'll probably get to Picasso next time. We'll see how far we could get, but that's a whole other episode coming down the pipeline soon. And we'll try to do that mid-December. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining me once again. I'm so grateful that you guys have been watching for the past like 2.5 hours while I've been giving feedback on your work. I'm so grateful to be able to share this community with you and to be able to experience the great artworks that you guys have been creating. And I'm so proud of everyone for continuing on this creative journey. You're getting better, and you're getting better, and you're getting better, and you're getting better. Painting at a time, one step forward each time. Doesn't always feel that way. Sometimes it feels like one step forward, 5 steps back. But I guarantee you, if you can recognize what's wrong with those paintings, what needs to be improved, then you haven't gone 5 steps back. You've actually gone for 5 steps forward. Maybe that painting isn't something you're going to hang on your wall, but it's not every painting we make is going to be a painting we hang on the wall. Sometimes a painting is just made as part of a learning experience, right? So congratulations to everyone on your achievements once again. In a couple of days, we're going to continue on our Master Study classes, and we've got some great stuff coming up down in on the pipeline here. I wonder if I want to share any of this. It looks like it's all jumbled up, so I'd have to, yeah. So you'll see, and you can also see in the Dropbox folder all of the paintings coming up down the list. So anyway, thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Maybe it's a little bit cold outside. Maybe that's a great time to catch up on some of the paintings you haven't had a chance to do in a while. So we'll see you guys on Tuesday and Thursday as regularly at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And next weekend we're doing a painting on Friday and Monday as well for Black Friday and Cyber Monday as well. So if you don't want to go out shopping, stick around with me and we'll get some paintings done. Okay, everyone? So we'll see you guys in a few days. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.